This is going to be a follow-up regarding the demanifested bugs on Sadako. This is recorded before the anniversary patch but after the Vecna DLC patch. If this has changed with the anniversary patch, I'll remove the video and give an update. Otherwise assume it's the same. This entire video is just trying to find consistency in the broken mechanics of Demanifest to try and make it so behaviour will actually patch the issues quickly, since it's been about 4 or 5 months now, and if we can say for certain how something is broken, it makes it much easier for them to fix it. There are 2 major issues regarding Sadako. First is how long she's invisible while demanifested is not at the time it's supposed to be of 1.2 seconds, and it wasn't consistent in how long she was invisible. The second is what the survivor sees versus what Sadako sees, and it's not in sync while demanifested. I'll start with her being out of sync since that's going to be the quickest one. I'd watch my initial video for a full breakdown if you care, but the too long didn't give a shit version is at the start of the demanifest cycle you would turn invisible on the survivor side a little after you would on the killer side, so you would need to wait a moment before moving while you are trying to do a demanifested mind game, or the survivor would see where you're heading. This one part of this issue seems to be working now, so you no longer need to wait a moment after you go invisible on your client before you move. However, there is still an issue somewhere because going out of sync over time is still happening, so the longer you're demanifested, the more out of sync between what you see and what the survivor sees becomes, meaning you still need to tap your manifest button before initiating a mind game if you want it to be consistent. Okay, did you see it? You saw me obviously right there, and then, right, let's do it a couple of times. I mean, it does, I mean, it's so obvious that, and then if I tap it once, it resets it, and there we go, and then it's fine. Oh. This is just post-edit me to show off this a bit easier. This footage shows the longer you're demanifested, the more out of sync it becomes. So in this situation, I've actually been invisible for about a minute or so. Top one is my POV, and the bottom one is what my teammate is seeing. As you can see, I'm blatantly invisible here on the survivor's perspective, but I'm fully visible here. If we go back, look, this is it in sync. So as I come out here. I'm invisible on my screen, completely invisible here, and I'm fully visible this whole time, so it is still out of sync if you wait a long time. But if I tap the manifest, okay, so I've just tapped manifest here. This is what you do to reset the cycle. So you just tap right click and then I go invisible and we're synced back up again, so then I can come back up and then do the thing. This is happening because either the time you're invisible or visible is different between a killer and the survivor's perspective, and honestly I've already spent about 40 hours staring at Sadako footage trying to work out what's what, and I'm just kind of over it at this point. Doesn't matter which one's out of sync to you as the player though, so don't worry. Just remember to tap the manifest button before you try to do a mind game, because what this does is it resets the sync animation between the survivor and the killer's perspective, which means that you can make it consistent for yourself. Next up we have the time in which you're invisible, and I do believe I've fully worked this one out, so hopefully behavior can get this fixed quickly. Now to show this off, I'm going to have to live commentary it. I can't really do a script, because if I do a script it covers up the main screen, and obviously I'm trying to show this off. Another thing I've done that might be a little bit more helpful is I've added a new thing in OBS where this will expand. So if I click this, as you can see, it takes up a lot of the screen, so it makes the preview a bit easier. All this is doing is taking this preview and making it bigger. It's not actually like edited in post edit, so if I like open up this menu, you can see where it's here. And then if I open that scene and I bring up the same menu, you can see the corner of it. So that's just that bit. I'll expand it when I need to, if I need to show off. The next thing that's very important is this is recorded from my POV this time. Before I had a friend record me as Sadako. They don't have Sadako unfortunately, so I can get my POV, which is important because I run at a higher resolution. I also run at higher frame rates, and I also run with higher graphics settings. I also record at much higher quality, so it makes it much better for me to try and work out things. Another thing that I found is if I go here in Vegas, I can enable quantized frame. Basically what this does, if I enable this, when I move left and right, it sticks to a frame, whereas if I disable it, so if I zoom in, actually it might be a little bit helpful to see. Notice how it's skipping like that much. If I disable it, it allows me to go between the frames and allows me to get much more accurate readings. Now one thing to note is that Sony Vegas records time codes, which is these numbers. That's like the time that's going up. It records that based on the frame rate. There are multiple frame rates going on. We have the actual recorded frame rate of the game. We have the frame rate that the game is running at. So my game runs at 120 FPS. It was recorded at 60 FPS. But the actual Sony Vegas file here, I've upped to 120 FPS. The reason I did this is because it will make the recording of the time a little bit more accurate, because it obviously goes off frames, so if there's double the frames, it'll be twice as accurate. Now, what's important to note is what the game decides as Sadako being invisible is her model. So if we go here, this is when she's fully disappeared. Her model completely disappears here, so we can see the hair. we go forward though, like the model's disappeared. But however, she plays effects while she's going invisible, and there is still a haze you can see. So if we look at the book, you can see here between these two frames, there's like a little bit of white that's going on here. Hang on, let me increase it here a bit. So if I go back and forth constantly, right there. If we look at this bookcase, we can see it's like phasing in and out. The game still classes this as invisible, even though there's clearly an effect going on here, like a visual effect, because this is classing the model as disappearing. So this frame is where this is marked. This is where the timer starts. The model completely disappears. Her hair is always the last thing to disappear. So the way that it is doing the timer in the game is based entirely on if the model is visible. So that's what. So I've done that for all of these. Or most of these. I got about halfway here and then I started to notice a pattern, so I didn't have to keep going. As for the timer, you'll notice the timer moves. Don't worry, they're timing the same thing, they're just timing different cycles of her invisible. So this bottom one is timing this first cycle, this top one will be timing the next cycle, and then disappears. It's because I was initially going to have this be like one big video that just shows off, but it doesn't need to be doing that. So if we just go through the timers and then look at the invisibility, we got 0.716, we got 0.699, we got 0.699, 0.699. Again, this is how long her model is disappeared. We have 0.716, 0.716, 0.716, 0.716. Now it's important to note, now remember when I was talking about it being linked to the frame rate of the video, or the link to the frames in which the time code is? It's important to note. So if we go to 0.716, one of these, we zoom in and we click on the point, you'll actually notice it drops down to 0.708. Hang on, let me just check which ones. Okay, we got it. That's good. Now, neither of these numbers are right. It's not 0.708 and it's also not 0.716. The reason for this is this time is happening between frames, and it won't pause the timer if it happens between two real frames. So if we enable quantizing frames and we notice where the cursor is now, it's going to skip slightly to the right when I enable it, because it has to, oh no, it didn't. Okay, so if I hit right, now it's at 0.716 because it's now skipped to a frame. If I go left now, it's at 0.708. So this point is at 0.708. This point is 0.716. But anything between these two numbers, it will not record on the timer. Or it won't pause on. Which means it can be anywhere between 0.708 and 0.716. Which means that all of these can be slightly inaccurate because of how it is. Now with this in mind, this occurs for everything. So it also occurs for the 0.691. And it also occurs for the 0.716. These are the two timers that I've got it to consistently got to every single time for how long her model is actually invisible. Which means that we can safely assume that the time in which she's actually invisible is 0.7 seconds, since that's the whole number between these numbers. And because it's definitely a number between them, because of how the way it's recording the time code, that's the only one that makes sense. So behavior, your invisibility on Sadako is actually put at 0.7 seconds on the dot, not at 1.2 seconds. So we're actually 0.5 seconds behind. That's a full half a second lower than where it's supposed to be. So I think I can speak for every Sadako main when I say, could you please buff this up to 1.2 seconds? And then later on, when we work out what it is that's out of sync, then change that, because this one is much more important. If you're wondering how bad 0.5 seconds is, 0.5 seconds is literally the difference between getting a hit on this loop and not getting a hit on this loop. Because right now, if you're behind it, if you're by the pallet, you'll appear around here, like a quarter of the way up the pallet. With that extra 0.5 seconds, you'll actually make it to about 3/4, which gives you time to demanifest and actually hit the survivor before they can get to the pallet. We are getting denied quite a lot of hits off this nerf. It's also important to remember that we can actually work around the fact that it's out of sync by just tapping manifest for now. It's not ideal, but we can work around it. We physically can't work around the fact that the time in which we're invisible is not right. So that's the update and how this is working at the moment. Hopefully with all this information, behavior will be able to quickly fix and address the time in which we're invisible. And on my own time, I'm going to try and work out what it is that's out of sync, or what it is that's causing out of sync, so we can try and work that out for behavior. Anyway, that's all for now. If you stick around, I'll see you in the next video.